Welcome back to the channel, guys. This is the type of walkway that you might only see on Pinterest, and it's a block paver walkway in a herringbone style. I haven't seen this done anywhere else, and it's a project that I've wanted to complete for ages, but the UK weather has been an absolute nightmare. In this video, I'm going to show you how I've built a sub base, how I've done the sides, which are like the retaining blocks, and then the herringbone pattern in the middle. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get on with it. So if you like the look of the herringbone pathway and you want to give this a go in your garden, I'm going to show you and break it all down so you can give it a go yourself. But before I jump into the how-tos, I just want to give a bit of the history of this project so you can understand the area that I'm working with. When I first moved into this property over 2 years ago, this used to be a flower bed, so there's lots of topsoil and roots that need to be removed. The flower bed used to be quite narrow, so I've had to build a wall next to it to extend the width of the pathway. So the plan was to remove the old slabs, dig out 200ml of topsoil and then fill it back in with MOT1. After filling it with 150ml of MOT1, I then used the whacker plate which I hired for the day to whacker it all down and get a solid foundation. Because I'd only hired the whacker plate for one day, I decided to put some sharp sand down in the middle of the pathway and then whacker that down too. I kept the sharp sand away from the edges of the pathway so I could mortar my retaining blocks in place. And here are a couple of the tips that I learned whilst doing this that will help you make a better job of mortaring in your retaining blocks. So start with making your mortar, which is a 4:1 mix of sand and cement. I used building sand and I laid a bed of mortar at roughly 20ml. I then got all the blocks, put them next to where I was working, and then laid the blocks on top of the mortar. The key point here is to make sure you're not pressing the blocks down into the mortar at this stage. And to ensure that you get the blocks the right height, get a piece of straight timber and a rubber mallet and gently knock them down until they are perfectly level and uniform. And after waiting a few days, the block pavers which were mortared in were fully set and I was able to start work on the most exciting part, which is the herringbone design. Now, I've never done this before, but I did know it was essential to get the sand in between those retaining block pavers absolutely level and at the right height, so that when I place my new block pavers in the herringbone design on top, that they wouldn't be above or below the retaining bricks. And to ensure that I got that perfectly right, I made a screening board and removed the size of a block from each side of that piece of MDF. The result? I was able to scrape it across the tops of the retaining blocks, giving me a perfectly level and flat bed for the herringbone design. And if you absolutely love the colour of these block pavers, just like I do, they're cream concrete block pavers and I got them from a company called Rock Unique. I've added the link to their website in the description. I started putting my blocks in place and measured with the speed square 45 degrees from the retaining blocks. That allowed me to make sure that I was going to be getting the right pattern as I moved down the walkway, and the brick line in the middle was a reference point to make sure that I didn't skew off in one direction. Because I'd managed to get all of the block pavers perfectly in the centre of the walkway, it was really easy for me to cut the 45-degree cuts on the blocks because every single one was the same. So I decided to make a jig, which was essentially just plyboard and some CLS timber, which would hold the block paver in place whilst I cut it with the DeWalt cut-off saw. And you might notice I'm using plastic shims behind the block. Those plastic shims allow me to move the block in and out of the jig, which helps me get the cuts absolutely perfect when there might be some variation in the herringbone block work.
In the stillness somewhere above, the city lights, you're falling in love. Still aware, you know it is true, that you are lost and this is a clue. Love is forever, love is forever. To believe you gotta let go. Light as a feather, light as a feather. Lucid dreaming over Tokyo. Love is forever, love is forever. Love is forever, love is forever. With the music still in your ears, you're on your way to conquer your fears. In this dream of your own desire, there is someone calling your name. Love is forever, love is forever.
I've finally been able to finish the block paver walkway. I've only got 2 steps left. Do I regret doing the herringbone? Maybe a little bit, because there's been so many different cuts along here. As you can see, I've had to cut all the sides to match, and luckily when I set my line up straight down the middle, I did do it in the middle, which means that all of the cuts at the side were exactly the same, so that saved a load of time, and I'm so glad I had that cutter. But 2 more steps to go and then it's fully finished. So I started putting these blocks into this step, but I realised that I hadn't compacted the sharp sand enough, so when I was banging it down with a hammer, they were sinking a little bit lower than these surrounding blocks. I had thought about doing the whole thing in like one whole mortar bed and then getting it all the same, but I just thought most of the weight would be on the front of the step. Anyway, I've taken all the blocks out that I placed in, and then now I've filled it back in with a little bit more, like a scattering of sharp sand, and then I'm just going to like hit it down with the block, and I'm going to measure the height. Really, I want it like just slightly above, like that. So I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but it's like 1 or 2 mil above these blocks here, and then when I hit it with a hammer, it sinks just nicely, so it's perfectly level with the front. So hopefully now it's got enough material in there and it won't sink anymore, and I'm going to put all of these bits that I've cut in back in and just see if that works. We've got this pattern here, and all we need to do is put another piece in the top there. So if we put a block on top like that, we now have our full dimension from there to there, which is the same as there to there, and then all we're doing is marking off where that comes to, like that, and now we have our full length, which goes in that way, because I like to keep the rounded corners to go into here so it doesn't look like they've been cut. The only cuts that I want are kind of on the outside. I don't know if that would make a big difference to the final outcome, but it's just the way that I'm doing it. So I now know that I need to cut a 45 across there, because the herringbone is all set at 45. So I'm using my speed square and just rotating it just like you would on timber and setting it to 45, because there's a 45 mark right there. And then I'm just going to run my pencil along that line. Now that there is my cut. So this is what I'm going to be removing. I've scored it with the grinder. I don't want to go all the way through it because it's dusty. So I'm going to go wet cut this and we'll put it back in place after. Right, so this is my cut block, exactly on that line that we were talking about. Let's see if it fits in there. There we go. Straight in. Perfect fit now. So I just need to hammer that down with the mallet, and then it'll be level with the rest of them. I've literally just stumbled across this really cool way to get a measurement for the blocks that sit in these really awkward places like this. So I'm using an offcut. This is not the right size, but if I place that in there just like that, I can see there's a gap at the back. And if I measure the size of the gap, here it's 32 mil. So if I take that block back out, get a full brick, place that on there just like that, measure the back 32 mil, and then draw a line onto the block just like that. Now that block, that bit there with that cut out, is the perfect size for that fill-in gap right there. I literally just stumbled across that. This is probably a very well known method, but works perfectly every time. And there we have it. I almost don't believe it myself. Like, this has taken a lot longer than I thought it would to do, but the block paver walkway is finally finished. And there's only a couple of things left to do to make it completely finished. And one is to put the kiln dried sand on. I've got that, I'm gonna do that in a minute. And then the final thing is to put the sealant on the top. That's gonna help prevent any weeds growing. So, almost finished, guys. I can't believe it, the walkway's finally done, the pavers are down, and I've just brushed all of the sand, the kiln dried sand, in between the gaps. Honestly, if you'd have told me at the beginning of this project that brushing the sand in between the gaps would have made this much difference, I don't think I would have believed it. But it really has, and it looks amazing. As always, when I finish a project, the sun's come out, and a really nice moment of finishing a project just feels even better. I'm so impressed with what I've done here, and I hope you've liked watching it too. If you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe. There's plenty more renovation projects and building projects coming up, and I'll see you on the next video.